We're going to run it, the next panel, which is on stormwater, the same way we did the first one. That is, each speaker will come up, do their bit, and then when they're all done, the three will come up for the Q&A. And so with that, I'm going to introduce John Stark. I think most of you know John. He's the director of the Washington State University Puyallup Research and Extension Center. He's the co-director of the Washington Stormwater Center as well, and a member of the Puget Sound Partnership Science Panel. And the Puget Sound Partnership is resident in the Center for Urban Waters as well, as you probably know. John is a professor, of course, at WSU and runs the exotoxicology program at WSU. His research deals with the protection of endangered species and ecological risk assessment of pollutants, with particular emphasis on the effects of pesticides and pesticide mixtures on salmon and their food. John has been a member of our steering committee from the beginning, and we really appreciate all that he's brought to the table to help make this event happen and to lead off our second panel of the day. John.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, well anyway, it's good to see you all here today. I'm going to talk to you about some of our research on stormwater at our center. Before I get into that, though, I want to just say that these are exciting times. Water quality, water quantity are major issues not only in the United States but throughout the world. And we're developing great teams and groups to work on these issues, and with businesses, university collaborations, and others. And I think it's just a fantastic time to be working in water issues right now. So anyway, as Bruce mentioned, I'm the director of the Puyallup Research and Extension Center of WSU, which is up the street here about 10, 15 minutes. And we've really redirected the center into water quality issues. I've run a salmon program there for a number of years. And with the advent of all this emphasis on stormwater, we've redirected the program into looking at stormwater effects on aquatic organisms. And I'm going to get into some of that today because there's a major question I hear from a lot of people. People talk about stormwater and pollution, but they say, well, where's the proof that stormwater really causes a problem? All right? We know that stormwater transports pollutants into the water, but so what? What does that really mean? And so with Jennifer McIntyre, and I want to point Jen out here, she's one of my postdocs, we've been trying to answer that question. And the first thing you got to understand is that this is not a forest, and I think we all understand that. But why do I say this? Forests have the ability to clean water, all right, to filter it, to reduce the flows. And when we have an urban setting like this, or even a suburban setting, we have a lot of runoff problems. And I think many of us are aware of that. And there are a lot of contaminants that can be moved through stormwater, and they come from various sources, such as vehicles, tires, brakes, exhaust, buildings, landscape, and industry. Okay, so we have a lot of metals, we have polyaromatic hydrocarbons from the combustion of fuels, phthalates from plastic containers and things, surfactants, pesticides. All of these things end up in our water, and then a lot of others end up in our water also through leaky septic systems, through water treatment plants, estrogens. It goes on and on, pharmaceuticals. One of the things that I find interesting is how much caffeine we find in our water around here, and I don't know why that is. You know, it just makes no sense to me. Anyone have a Starbucks? Anyway, yeah, no, we do. We have a lot of caffeine in the water. We have a lot of Prozac in our water. So we have a lot of very happy fish swimming around, if they're alive, right? But anyway, the risk of stormwater to salmon, for those of you who aren't familiar with salmon are called anadromous fish because they spend part of their life cycle in fresh water and part in the ocean. Based on that definition, we have a minimum of 5 species of salmon, and if you add steelhead and a few other species, you can actually come up with more than that. But they spend the juvenile part, the spawning occurs in fresh water, the eggs hatch, and then the immatures spend between 1 and 2 years in fresh water, depending on the species. And then they move out into estuaries where they feed, and then into the ocean, spend a couple of years out there, 2 to 3, and then come back and spawn again. For those of you from this area, already they're fishing on the Puyallup River. Coming down River Road this morning, I saw that. And so we know a little bit about salmon, but what we don't really know is how susceptible they are and at what life stage they are susceptible to pollution. The reason I say this is the obvious answer to that is they're susceptible when they're young, embryos and young fry in fresh water, but now there's evidence that returning salmon, adults that come into urban streams, are dying before they spawn. I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but NOAA Fisheries is working on this in a big way. They're calling it pre-spawn mortality, where we have adult salmon coming in to spawn, and before they spawn, even up to as much as 90% of the fish can die, which is a very serious issue. But what we're interested in right now, and what we've been working on for a number of years, is looking at the young stages of salmon and the types of pollutants that they might be exposed to and what that might mean. And when we look at embryos of fish, of salmon, for example, what we find is that about 10% are abnormal and die anyway, even under perfect conditions. But when they're exposed to stormwater, and this is a study done by NOAA in Longfellow Creek in King County, about 75% of them are abnormal and in terms of their development and die. You can see in this arrow that there are blood clots forming in the head of this fish. So anyway, what we're interested in is green stormwater infrastructure, and in particular what we call low-impact development, although that term is falling out of favor. And at our center, we have a very large stormwater low-impact development system that's been put in place. It's about $1.5 million installation where we have replicated pervious pavements of two types, asphalt and concrete, and then various types of rain gardens. And what we're interested in is first of all, determining, does stormwater cause a problem? And if so, can we clean it to the point where that problem is alleviated? And so, again, this is a collaboration with many groups. This particular project is with the Washington Stormwater Center, Urban Waters, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, NOAA. We have a bunch of other groups too, including the EPA. So we're focusing on acute impacts, and the reason I bring this up is we're looking at short-term effects and primarily looking at lethal effects and then what we call sublethal effects, which there are a series of these where animals may not die, but they're impacted in a negative way. And we're also characterizing stormwater runoff, what's in the water, and trying to figure out what the effects are on not only fish, but on the food that they eat, which are primarily aquatic invertebrates. And then we're trying to figure out which of these green stormwater infrastructure techniques can minimize that damage, as I mentioned, both to the salmon and other fish and to their food. Okay, so what we've done is, at our center, we originally thought we might be able to collect stormwater that was polluted enough to have an effect on organisms. This was not true, because we are not in an urban setting, and we decided to collect stormwater in Seattle. And we picked the 520 bridge. And the reason is this. NOAA is, let's go back to that arrow. That's the 520 bridge. Right under the bridge where this arrow is are downspouts that go into the NOAA parking lot at Montlake, okay? And since this is a collaboration with NOAA, and I'll tell you an interesting story about this. I can remember years ago going to Puget Sound Partnership meetings with Joel Baker, in fact, and parking underneath the 520 bridge in their parking lot, and the parking lot goes right into the edge of Lake Washington. And it was raining a lot, and the lake is high, and the water of the lake was actually in the parking lot. And I remember parking my car and getting out and stepping in a puddle and going, what's going on here? Well, anyway, I looked up, and there's this downspout coming off the 520 bridge, and there's water just cascading down into this parking lot. I'm going, who came up with this brilliant idea, right? Well, anyway, that was years ago. Well, guess what? When we were trying to figure out where we're going to get polluted stormwater, I said, hey, man, let's get it on the downspouts right here. So there's the downspout, okay? And look at the color of the water coming off the bridge. That's to the right. And that, I mean, it's almost black, all right? So we started capturing this water. We've been doing this now for about a year and a half. And most recently, we've done a bunch of studies on zebrafish and an aquatic invertebrate called Daphnia, or also known as water fleas. Daphnia are really important organisms in the food chain. They're the first animal in the food chain, serve as food for a lot of small fish. And we found devastating effects last year. So anyway, this year, though, we actually moved from zebrafish into salmon. And again, we're looking at Daphnia, and we're also actually looking at mayflies. And we'll get into some of that. And these are some of the tests that we were doing. We're developing tools. So we have an acute mortality or lethality test for Daphnia, 14-day reproduction test for Daphnia, and in the zebrafish, we're looking at mortality and then a whole series of defects that develop that occur in the developing embryos. Anyway, in the invertebrate reproductive test, What we do is we start with these newborn animals, we let them reproduce, and then we count the number of live adults and the number of offspring. And this is untreated stormwater, and this is from last year in August, and then more recently in the spring and early summer this year. And what you see here are the number of females that we started with in the lighter color, and then the number of offspring they're producing after exposure to stormwater. And you can see there's a huge reduction in offspring. Anyways, but what we found is that some storms were not very lethal and others were very lethal, and a lot of it had to do with the period between rain events. Okay? And again, you can see that here, where survival could be 100% at some times of the year and 0 at others. We thought that was fairly important. And so the 100% lethal events had average daily precipitation of usually greater than 14 days. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all the details of all this, but the main thing we're finding in zebrafish is cardiac abnormalities, where they're having heart defects. Their hearts don't develop correctly. Oh, and I've got actual heartbeats going here. I don't know if you can see that. But that's a normal fish. Then the second one is a slightly abnormal fish. And then the third one, you have a totally deformed heart and this big open sac of air, basically, where the heart is not beating correctly and the fish is completely deformed and it's not going to survive. And that's, again, after exposure to 520 bridge stormwater. All right, and then we started looking into genetics. And because of time, I'm not going to get into genetics of this, but what I can tell you is this. Runoff alters the genetics in these animals that send signals to heart development. Okay? But anyway, stormwater runoff constituents, when we go ahead and look at what's in the stormwater, we find a lot of stuff. But primarily, it's metals and PAHs, and then we have a bunch of other compounds, including a lot of bacteria, and like E. coli. But what we're finding is that a lot of the effects we're seeing are due to PAHs. The metals don't seem to be causing the damage we thought they would, at least to fish. All right, but again, there are a lot of poisons in this stormwater runoff. Now, at our center, I mentioned that we have these large-scale, low-impact development systems, and I'm going to show some pictures of that. And I think of quite a few of you have been to our center and seen this, but we also have smaller systems, column systems, in our greenhouses where we can rapidly assay stormwater. And so what we've done recently is taken this 520 bridge stormwater and run it through soil columns. Some have plants in them and some don't. And then we expose Daphnia and zebrafish and mayflies, which are, again, a major food source for salmon, and then coho salmon. And so we expose them to untreated stormwater, and then stormwater run through those column systems that represent rain gardens. And we waited this summer for 50, we had 50 dry days, and then we got this first flush off the highway, transport that to WSU, and guess what? Untreated stormwater killed 100% of our young salmon, okay? When we ran it through the columns, though, 100% survival in both systems, with plants or without. Very impressive. The other thing we've done is this. We've diluted the stormwater. We've gone down to a 10% dilution. And even at 10%, we're having all kinds of sublethal and even some lethal effects with stormwater. So one of the questions is this. We're looking at undiluted stormwater coming off of the bridge. When that stormwater hits the Lake Washington, it's diluted greatly. So again, this is not proof that we're having this incredible damage, but you have to remember, how many storm events do we have? How many cars go over that bridge? So there's a continuous input into the water. But then the question is yeah, but there's other stuff in the water that binds this stuff up, and it's not biologically available. And that's the question that Joel Baker is going to answer. Right, Joel? Sure. Sure. He goes, sure. But anyway, these are questions that need to be addressed. But the bottom line is that undiluted stormwater is devastating. Even diluted stormwater is devastating to these fish. We know we can clean it with rain gardens. That's key information. What we really don't know, and what I had a scientist say to me, scientists are by nature skeptics. I had a scientist say, I don't believe any of this. And I said, why is that? And they said, well, go to Lake Washington. Are there fish in there? And I go, yeah. No effect. you know, can't be having a cause and effect. I said, well, it's much more subtle than that. It just doesn't really work that way. We believe stormwater is having an effect. We have proof now that it can cause damage. It's another issue, though, trying to determine what that level is. How much time do I have? Am I over time, Joel?
You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, we've also looked at mayflies. And what we found is that runoff, stormwater runoff untreated, results in about a 65% mortality rate in mayfly larvae that are in the water. When we have run the water through the 2 rain garden systems I showed you, one with plants and one without, we basically get rid of that effect, even in these aquatic invertebrates. Okay, so here's a couple of pictures of our systems. The permeable pavement, one of the systems is here, which is asphalt. We also have concrete. We have various rain gardens. And again, like I say, these are larger scale, and we're trying to answer a lot of questions about these issues. And again, as I said, this is not a forest, and so we have to address stormwater as a problem and ways to deal with it. And rain gardens and pavements are certain tools, but there are a lot of other tools out there as well. A lot of companies make all kinds of products to clean and filter stormwater. The TAPE process or program within the Washington Stormwater Center that Kurt Marks and Joel are running is evaluating a lot of these things. So there's a lot of opportunity here, I think, for businesses to come up with innovative solutions for stormwater cleaning as well. Some of those are already in place, and I think a lot more are to come. So again, to me, this is a very exciting time to be working in water and stormwater issues, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much.
Our next speaker is Mike Slevin. Mike's the interim director of Tacoma's Environmental Services Department. He manages and operates 3 utilities for the city: wastewater, surface water, and solid waste, and that employ over 500 people with a biennial operating budget in excess of $240 million and a total asset fund of $700 million. And I think that's one of the messages we heard this from Randy Hanna also, or got a sense of it. These are big operations and in our world we would call them big businesses that within the public sector that we all rely upon. And I think that is good to remind ourselves of how massive some of these operations are. I wanted to note that Mike recently retired from the Washington Army National Guard after 28 years of active service. He served 3 overseas combat tours and was awarded 2 Bronze Stars medals for his deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's been with the city of Tacoma for 18 years, so please join me in welcoming Mike Slevin.
Well, good afternoon. It's afternoon now almost. I'm going to be talking today about Tacoma's 10-year monitoring record in the FOSS. But before I even get started, I'd be remiss in talking a little bit about my history in it and how I got involved, because really the person that got me involved is sitting in this room. I don't know how many of you know Karen Larkin, but she's really the Obi-Wan, would it be, of clean water in the area. She's been a great mentor to me throughout my career, and she hired me from WSU back in 1994. And there's another person in the room, Lane Alfonso, and the first job I did for the city of Tacoma on a very cold January at about midnight, right? Was that the title study, Lane? Was we were drilling wells at the head of the Foss Waterway, collecting sampling data to help design the cleanup of the Foss Waterway. And so Karen hired me up and then put me immediately back outside in the cold with Lane. So it was very interesting times. But we've been doing this now for about 20 years, cleaning the Foss. And you see the economic development connections to cleaning the Foss. As you look at the 2 pictures in front of you here, you see just in 1999, the picture in the upper left before a lot of the development. And then you see a current picture from just a couple years ago. And you see the difference in development that occurred due to the cleanup and the combination of efforts between utilities and economic development driving factors and business and privates and even regulatory agencies, EPA and ecology, when everyone comes together and works on it. It's not an easy path, and Karen could probably talk more about that than I can, since I was busy sampling back then when she was fighting those battles to get this site cleaned up. But the efforts that the staff and all the other people involved did in those years have paid off really, really extraordinarily. And as we go through this, we'll do that. Let me see if I get this right here. There we go. I'm going to start off with a quick cross-section of the waterway. So this is a quick, it's simplified. I think Lane drew the very first one way back when. So but it shows the different types of contaminants that were heading into the Foss back when we started our cleanup of the Foss waterway way back in, started studying it in the late 80s and early 90s. And you see that there we had in-water coal tar seeps from coal tar contamination. We had some upland tar seeps from oils and coal tars. We still have stormwater inputs to the, which is what we focus a lot on right now, is the stormwater inputs, and we'll get on to that later. We also have usage or marina traffic, boats, et cetera. And then we have something that we're paying more attention to recently is the atmospheric deposition that we're seeing. We've got definite connections to the fact that Pierce County is a non-attainment area, and we're starting to see some of those different connections. And in the cleanup, there was, was listed as a Superfund site, and basically we had cumulative impacts of 100 years of industry. And the story I like to say is that, there was basically 100 years of pollution from 1884 to 1984 in Tacoma's, the heart of Tacoma's main waterway, our city waterway, the Thea Foss. And so that 100 years of pollution gathered up, and then in the early 80s, it was declared a Superfund site through the commencement-based Superfund site. We then spent, 30 years cleaning it up. So 100 years to pollute it, 30 years to clean it up. I inherited Bruce talked about the large utilities that we have, or the big businesses that we run to keep the water clean and to keep the environment clean. I inherited those organizations from my mentors previous to me that had helped clean it up. And so what we're trying to do now in our utilities is make sure that we can keep the waterway clean, not only for the next generation, but for the next 1,000 years. It took us 100 years to dirty it up and learn our lesson, 30 years to clean it up, and now let's see if we can keep it there and even make it better. And that's kind of it's a long, hard road, because like the previous presentation said, it's not a forest. But there are lots of things we can do to make things better. So I got a little ahead of myself, I think, here. But history, quick background. In 1983, Commencement Bay was declared a Superfund site, with the Thea Foss being a large portion of that, the head of that. In 2001, EPA and Ecology, with the city, we entered the Foss work plan. We included aggressive source control, which we'll talk about a little bit further. We focused on the watershed that discharges into the Foss, and our goal was to monitor the Foss's cleanup and ensure that we don't recontaminate. There are several different portions of the Foss and how it was cleaned up, whether it was capped or whether people worked on cap at the head of the waterway, whether it was removal of sediment or natural attenuation. The plan and development of the Foss and the spending of the $105 million had numerous different ways we could do that, depending upon the contaminant levels and locations in the Foss. But we've been studying this since 2001 now, and we have 10 years of really solid data. Basically, the Thea Foss waterway can be looked at with the data set we have, as Ecology recognized last year in NACWA, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. We received a pretty great award from them for the data set we have, that we actually have. You can look at the Thea Foss waterway and our maintenance technology and data sets, and take a look at that as an existing laboratory where we can introduce new types of filtering, new types of treatment, and we can actually see what, because we have a baseline, the first city in the country to have a baseline of data to see exactly what effects these new technologies or these new policies can have on a living waterway. So the monitoring results, this data set I keep talking about, what does it consist of? Okay, Well, we've taken over 1,300 samples, over 7 outfalls, and the outfalls are listed there throughout the foss. We've gotten base flow, we've gotten stormwater, and we've gotten sediment samples. What have these shown us over time? 75% trends are significantly and statistically decreasing. That's really important. Talking with EPA about some of this data set, we're one of the few cities, I think we're the only city now, there's a couple others that have been testing for enough years to start to get some statistical trends, but nothing on this scale. So, and that's in the whole United States. There's some places out in Chesapeake Bay that have been testing, but they don't have the level of data, the amount of data we have that we can make these direct connections. And we continue to improve year by year. So in year 8, which would be 2009, we had 10 of 49, or about 20%, were showing improvement. In 2010, we had 26 out of 49 that were improving, or about 50%. And now the last, on the 10-year record, we had 37 out of 49, or 75% of our testing results showing significant improvement from pollution. And the monitoring results. So this goes to show you some of the data and the trend lines for those data. In outfall 233, you see a 93% reduction of pyrene out of that outfall. It's pretty incredible that this is what the data set is showing you. And we were able to connect this. And again, we got an 87% reduction in DEHP in the outfall 245. These are really significant. And how do we do this is the question. What's the connection to? What changes have we made to make some of these detectable limits drop to these levels this quickly? It's pretty unprecedented. And so what we did was we overlaid the data sets, and this is this you're seeing 237A, which is one of the twin 96ers at the head of the foss draining from the Nally Valley. What we did was we took the processes we had in place, the source control efforts, the maintenance efforts, street sweeping, treatment retrofits of hot spots, and we took those and we placed them over the graph of the improving trends to see which treatments we were doing were making significant differences. And so from 2002 to 2007, we had some source control efforts going on. And we were maintaining that. We were doing a lot of inspections, a lot of training, a lot of those types of things. In 2007, we started twice yearly street sweeping. And we saw, look at the difference we had. We just started seeing a trend drop down. We saw another significant trend after we, in 2008, we did what we were calling enhanced maintenance. So we went out, we actually cleaned certain areas of the Foss Basin, the stormwater pipes that go there, and then we saw this increased trend. And then finally, our last effort we did in 2010, we're still collecting data on this, was we had hotspots. So we tracked all the way up the watershed on testing upland from the foss itself, not just the foss itself, to see where areas were hot. And we implemented different protocols based upon the different subdrainage areas upstream. And what we found was that we had spots where we could figure out where the contamination was coming from, and you can mitigate it through source control or through enhanced maintenance or through additional street sweeping. And then we had spots where, you know what, no matter what we tried, we just couldn't get it under control. And we did one area up on Ferry Street, not far from the TNT, where we actually put in a point source structure, and we filtered that little subdrainage. And now we have the events where that hot spot, is what, as we called it, is now cleaned up. And we're not seeing that contamination eventually lead down through the drainage areas, down through the watershed, and into the foss. So there's kind of a hierarchy of things we need to do to be more effective and more cost effective. The first one of those is source control. Okay, so spill response business inspections, training. Prevention is the best cure. Your grandmother had it right? Put on your coat. So, and that's basically it. 3/4 of this stuff is training. I mean, if you can get out and talk to the businesses, let them know how they can affect their environment. Most of them want to comply. And it's not just businesses. I mean, one of our biggest fights, believe it or not, was with our own fire department. You know, firemen, I'm washing my truck. We have to wash our truck every day, right? Well, getting them, even though they had facilities in place to wash it correctly and to divert their car washing or their fire truck washing into the proper sewage system, the sanitary sewage system, was rather difficult, and it took a lot of operational changes and changing a culture. But it can be done. And then you need to continually sample to determine are your efforts showing the desired results, and how do you do that? And you need your base flows, you need your rain first flush events, as we just seen, and you need your sediments, and so that you can keep track on all of that. And this is all of our source control and monitoring effort that goes into that. And we have one of our divisions, our source controller in our science and engineering group, that this is their job within our utility to do that. Enhanced maintenance. This is one, I've talked to a few people in Seattle that aren't very happy about us getting this award for this, because I think this is a game changer. Historically, we have said, and people have said, oh, it's non-point source, you can't really control it, because that's really what we're looking at here, is the non-point source contaminants. I mean, for years and years, people have been spend more money, get the treatment plants to get cleaner, get higher industrial point source permits, and the source control stuff, or the non-point source, it's really just not controllable. There's not much we can do about that, so let's focus on the other guys. Well, on the plant side, the publicly owned treatment works side, our contaminants have dropped to levels where really they're not the primary factor anymore. You can take a treatment plant and you can add tertiary treatment, you can spend $1 billion, and you're going to have 1% of the pollutants, you might have a 20%, 30% reduction on 1%. That's not a lot. But if you take that $1 billion and you go program it, use it for program needs, for source control, enhanced maintenance, and those types of things, you're getting a much larger chunk of the pollution that's going to be affected by a higher percentage rate. So your ultimate reduction in pollution is much, much higher with a lot of these things. And the enhanced maintenance program was very effective. We went through, we cleaned up our pipes, we cleaned up our catch basins. We have a maintenance protocol for cleaning those out. We removed some sediment in some of our catch basins that may have been there for decades. And by doing so, we just stopped a lot of that contaminant that's been caught in our catch basins and stuck in our pipes from ever making it down to the fosse, and we saw a huge amount of that. The other piece is cleaning the streets. We moved our street sweeping efforts from our public works road crews to our stormwater utility or our surface water utility, because that is the goal. I mean, the goal is if you keep the streets clean, the effect is on the stormwater. I've had a lot of talks recently with Washington Department of Transportation on exactly that. How can we clean up, keep better control of the 705 corridor, the 509 corridor, and I-5 between Fife and the Nally Valley, because of their effects on the fosse itself. And they've actually moved crews in part due to this data set that shows how effective it is on the water quality if they bring in additional assets and keep those major thoroughfares clean. I'm pretty sure they'd like to hear from Mr. Stark on the 520 bridge too after that presentation, so you should connect those two. And then treatment, the final step. This is how we track our data sets, and this is the treatment retrofit I just discussed out by Ferry Road. So we go up the watershed into the sub-drainages, and we have our data stacked, and you can see how we're having effect in certain areas. And then we hit this certain area that's in the red on the map on the right, where we just could not find where the contamination was coming from. Okay, so we actually went in and we removed some old heating oil tanks. We thought that was it, but it didn't stop. We removed a bunch of dirt, thought that was it didn't stop. just could not track the source for no matter how hard we tried. And so we went to the final step. When you can't get to the source, you need to treat that little sub-basin. We applied for EPA for a grant, or excuse me, Ecology for a grant. And this is what we constructed. We constructed one of the largest storm filters, basically, in the region. And it's been very effective. The water's not clean. There is much higher cost to go with structure than there is enhanced maintenance. There is maintenance costs. But when the overall quality of the water is the effect, you reach a point where you can't do it through either the source control and training methods and the monitoring or the enhanced maintenance, then this is where you need to go to. And you need to be dedicated to this up front and plan and program for it. Enhanced maintenance, by far the most effective cost per dollar. Keeping your system clean, tracking that, having protocols, and having a routine maintenance piece is absolutely the way to go with regards to getting the most bang for the buck.
You have about 1 minute.
Lessons learned, source control, extreme maintenance, treatment retrofit. And it's all about the maintenance, if you didn't get that from the rest of the presentation. I mean, you need to have the other stuff too, but maintaining your system and keeping it clean and knowing where it is and knowing what goes into it and out of it is really important.
Next, and the beauty of water and dealing with water issues is you get cougars and huskies united to save the world. Look at these two guys. They have done grant projects together. They want the Apple Cup to be a tie. They're just our kind of people. Joel Baker. Joel Baker holds the Port of Tacoma Chair in Environmental Science at the University of Washington, Tacoma, and is the science director of the Center for Urban Waters in Tacoma, of course, and directs the Puget Sound Institute at the UW. His research interests center on the transport of organic contaminants in the environment, specifically atmospheric transport and deposition, and you'll be hearing more about that in a moment. He was the inaugural chair of the Puget Sound Partnership Science Panel, and in 2010, the Seattle Aquarium awarded him their annual Conservation Research Award. So with that, please join me in welcoming Joel Baker.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking Bruce and Connie for their leadership in this area. I had the privilege of attending that dinner that was referred to, that's now several years ago, where I remember we were sitting around having quite a bit of wine, and Connie Bacon said, you know what, I think Tacoma should be the clean water city of the world. And we all rolled our eyes and said, okay. So here we are.
It worked.
It worked. So I learned whatever Connie Bacon says, man, you gotta grab onto that. What I thought I would do is to try to build on the talk that Mike and John just gave you, and not so much talk about what we've done in the past, but what we might do in the future and what capacities we have, and speak specifically about the role of the universities in this team that's come together in Tacoma and in Pierce County around clean water. And I'll try to do it quickly because we're a little bit behind schedule. So let me talk a little bit about what I see our role as a university, and as our chancellor mentioned in our opening comments, UW-Tacoma takes very seriously our mission and our commitment to being an urban serving university. That works really well for those of us who think about urban issues and urban water quality. We offer degrees at an undergraduate level in environmental science and studies, but the message for all of you is that we're growing rapidly here at UW-Tacoma, and we're building new programs, we're building new courses, and unlike large established campuses left unnamed, there's not a lot of concrete poured at UW-Tacoma yet. There's a lot of opportunity to think creatively about new educational programs and new ways of training students. So we're really interested in things like information technology and how it intersects with the environment, to Paul's point earlier. We're not constrained, we're not required to offer the same old courses and same old degrees that every other university does. We can do something different. And that's really an exciting opportunity, and indeed is one of the reasons I came to UW-Tacoma. We have a number of educational approaches that we're taking related to this clean water idea. and I just wanted to briefly mention a couple of them. Our group over at Urban Waters runs something called the Sound Citizen program in collaboration with some colleagues at UW-Seattle. Sound Citizen is a way of engaging high school students and junior high school students around the idea that what they do in their homes matters to their watershed, and what they do and what their families do in their purchasing decisions, in their decisions about whether they drive or take mass transit, all those things affects water quality. And this is a program that allows not only students from traditionally underserved middle and high school schools in our area to get involved in science and math, but also when they go home at night, they talk about what they've done, and they're training their parents and their siblings to think about, well, the stuff that goes down your drain goes somewhere, that you do in fact live in a watershed, and we should all think about how the system works together. So that's been a very effective and exciting program for us. Another program we run, I'll just mention briefly, and John Stark mentioned it as well. One of the roles of the universities in our collaboration through the Washington Stormwater Center with Washington State University is to play the role that universities often play of being a sort of a neutral ground, being a third party to come in and evaluate, test, weigh in on issues. So Kurt Marks, who's here, works with us on the TAPE program. This is a certification program for stormwater technologies that's based out of the Stormwater Center and Urban Waters. Think of it as an underwriter's laboratory type model. If vendors have, or as vendors develop new stormwater control technologies in the state of Washington, or for use in the state of Washington, we help them design testing protocols. We evaluate the results of those tests, and in fact, we advise the Department of Ecology on whether or not those new technologies should get a stamp of approval for use in Washington State. The message to you is that that's an opportunity, I think, for economic development in this region, because we have a protocol in place to certify whether the technologies work under realistic conditions. That program's been running for a couple of years, and we think this is going to help foster the development of new technologies as we bring together the group of vendors from around the country, and what we call our board of external reviewers, which are really stormwater experts from around the country that get together and discuss these new emerging technologies. So those are two programs. So we're engaged in outreach education in K through 12, and we're engaged in a certification. But how I wanted to spend most of the time up here was to talk about the kinds of research that we're doing at the Center for Urban Waters with undergraduate students from UW-Tacoma and the group we've assembled over there. And there's a couple main themes. We have, and it was mentioned earlier, a program called the Puget Sound Institute. This was born out of my 20 years of frustration working in Chesapeake Bay, where there was never enough time and no one would ever contract with you to analyze data or think. It was easy to get money to hire a boat and go out and collect water samples, generate lots of data, but all of us, I think, have this sort of shared common frustration in the environmental field that there isn't enough time to analyze the information. So when I moved out here and was in collaboration with US EPA and some of our partners, we established the Puget Sound Institute as basically a place to go think about all things Puget Sound. We do a variety of things. I won't belabor or get into the details of it, but one of the things that we're doing at the Puget Sound Institute is becoming a clearinghouse for all authoritative information for the science and engineering communities, so that when they need to go get information about Puget Sound, there's one place to go. We have developed something called the Encyclopedia Puget Sound, which is going to be formally launched next week, but you can go to it now, eopugetsound.org. This is our site where a large number of scientists from the region have contributed materials into a coordinated website. So that's the Puget Sound Institute. The research that goes on in my laboratory are all really built around the theme of coupling research-grade analytical methods with statistics and deterministic models, really to ask questions about where do pollutants come from in stormwater and in surface waters and in the atmosphere. So doing things like pollutant source trackdown that Mike Slevin spoke of earlier, and I'll show you an example in a minute. Contaminant source apportionment, how important is the transportation sector versus the home heating source sector, questions like that. But probably more importantly, and like many of you in the room, I think I've spent most of my career trying to clean up things from the past. You know, pHs, PCBs, lead, mercury, all these things that, 100 years of bad behavior. And our hope is, or at least my hope is that we're trying to get ahead of the curve. We know that there are tens of thousands of new chemicals put into commerce. Most of them are probably benign or not anything to be alarmed about, but we need significant screening techniques. And we need the analytical techniques so we can go out and figure out if these things are showing up in the environment. And the goal there is to not be, 50 years from now, whoever takes Mike's slot in the city is going to be cleaning up the messes we're making right now. We're trying to get out of that mode. So looking at new chemicals. So let me just talk a little bit about the tracer work that we're doing, just as an example. So John Stark had mentioned caffeine. Yes, there's caffeine in the water everywhere around here. That's of interest to us, not so much because we think caffeine is going to kill fish or cause them not to spawn or whatever it is they do, but because it's a good tracer of us. So if we find water, ambient water, we find groundwater, we found seeps along the shoreline that contain high concentrations of caffeine, it's pretty clear it's not coming from birds, it's not coming from cows, it's not a natural process, it's coming from us. As far as I know, we're the only species that consume large quantities of caffeine. So, and this requires that you were able to measure caffeine in water. And just to show you some data that was generated yesterday. So one of the big issues in Puget Sound, you probably know, is shellfish bed closures due to E. coli contamination, right? This happens every summer. It rains. The E. coli is a bacteria that comes from human waste and animal waste. And it ends up in the shellfish beds, and they have to close the shellfish beds. So there's a lot of effort. So where's the E. coli come from, right? And so this is a case study of the kinds of work we do all the time. So the farmers point to the sewage treatment plants and say, well, it's not my cows, it's obviously the sewage treatment plants, or it's the failing septic systems. And the sewage treatment plant operators or the septic homeowners go, no, I saw a cow yesterday standing out in that creek. It's obviously a cow. And then they both get together and go, you know what, it's actually the birds. We've thought about this hard, it's actually the birds. So let's kill all the birds. So here's a plot, and this is, I don't know how well you can see this, but this just as an example. So what we've done in collaboration with a county that I can't name, because these data haven't been publicly released, we just did these yesterday. But they went out and collected, so this is a shoreline of Puget Sound. They collected some water seeping out of along the shoreline. They measured the amount of E. coli in those samples. We measured the amount of caffeine in the samples, and this is a log scale on the y-axis, or on both axes for that matter. And sure enough, the samples that had lots of E. coli had lots of caffeine. Ta-da, right? So what's happening is we're having failing septic systems dominating the system, and that the E. coli, in fact, can be traced back to the septic tanks. It's not the cows, it's not the birds. There are lots of other tracers in the world if we know how to measure them. And this is my favorite one. We're just beginning to develop this. This is Splenda, the Splenda story. So Splenda is chlorinated sugar, chlorinated sucrose. The reason that you can eat it, and it's very, very sweet, but it doesn't have any calories, is that you cannot digest it. You don't metabolize it in your system. It passes right through you. Indeed, we think it passes not only through you, but it passes through Mike's treatment plants. It gets out into the water. And in fact, there's reports now from around the world that sucralose, which is the active ingredient of Splenda, is now being detected in drinking water systems around the world. Not in wastewater, not in stormwater. In the actual tap water coming out of your tap, there is sucralose in your water because it's stable. It doesn't degrade by design. So again, if we find sucralose in water, it's a good indication of human waste. One further example, because one of the big issues in Puget Sound and elsewhere is trying to tease out nutrient nutrient loading and bacteria pathogen loading from livestock versus human is one of the big debates. And it turns out that livestock have their own set of pharmaceuticals, and as do humans. And this slide shows a couple of different antibiotics, one that is used exclusively by livestock and humans in Russia, it turns out. So apparently if you're in Russia, they have slightly different licensing agreements for antibiotics, but at any rate. So setting Russia aside for a moment, we know that if we can analyze these chemicals in water, one of them is an antibiotic used by humans, and one is an antibiotic used by cows and other livestock. So again, we can sort that out. And indeed, we can measure in the same samples I just showed you. This is the antibiotic that is used by humans, plotted versus the amount of E. coli in water samples. And you can see that the samples that rang the bell for E. coli also have a lot of the human antibiotic in it. So we can do this again and again. The point is that we have the analytical capability to measure lots and lots of chemicals, and they tell us interesting things about what's happening in the environment. Okay, so let me close then by talking about the tools that are available for collaboration. And I want to emphasize the point that the program that we've built at Urban Waters and here at UW-Tacoma is designed explicitly for collaboration with the outside world. We very much want to build partnerships with not only our current partnerships with the City of Tacoma and the Port of Tacoma and other entities, but increasingly with the private sector. We have really, really good labs. Any analytical chemists in the group? Probably not, right? So I won't belabor the point. We have really, really good labs. We spent a lot of money on lots of instrumentation that I could impress you with. So we have, and it's a partnership between the City of Tacoma and UW-Tacoma. And I won't go into the fine details of this, but suffice it to say, this is without question, and I'm a little biased here, the best environmental analytical lab in the Pacific Northwest is right down the street. More pictures of boxes that are pictures of expensive boxes, right? So this is the City of Tacoma's new, it's about $400,000 box. Should impress you. The point is we can measure lots of things, and this capability is available to another expensive box. It is available for use by our community. Now let me wrap up with my final slide, and this goes back to the kind of the thrust of this meeting. We were quite fortunate with the leadership of Bruce Kendall and Connie Bacon and the others mentioned earlier to be awarded an innovative partnership zone for clean water technology here in the Tacoma region. And as part of that, or as a result of that, we were also fortunate to receive in the last legislative cycle a fairly substantial capital grant to develop what we're calling the Clean Water Innovation Development and Technology Transfer Lab at UW-Tacoma. This is a new type of laboratory for the university, and it's located, where are we, up the hill in our science building. And the designer of it, where's Ben? Ben, wave your hand. Is the architect who's been under contract now to design the space for us. This is a different kind of lab in the sense that this lab is explicitly designed to work with external partners. We're building kind of hotel space is the concept, so that the private sector can come in and use space for development of either wet labs or sort of bench scale experiments that they might want to do for weeks to months to maybe a year or so. Access to our students through internship opportunities, access to our analytical instrumentation that I mentioned earlier, and also access to local fabrication shops as well. So this is a new thing for us. We're trying to engage the community. We're trying to have a porous university model where we work hand in hand with developers of new technology. And this will be open in the fall of 2013 if we stick on schedule, right, Ben? So look forward to talking to you more about that. I will stop. I just encourage all of you. We have a reception planned for you at Urban Waters. We hope to see you all down there. If nothing else, there's free wine. So
And beer.
And beer. Now the beer's, you got to pay for the beer. Thanks.
Motion, anybody? Well, I have a question. I want to ask about big data. An earlier presenter introduced us, Paul Brown, to the concept of big data. I know at University of Washington, Tacoma, at least at the Institute of Technology and probably other places, there are researchers looking at how to use big data. So I wanted to ask you all, in no particular order, maybe we'll start with Mike in the middle and then move from there. Talk about if you are trying to tackle the issue of how to use all the data, assuming you're collecting a lot of data, which it sounds like you are, how are you using that, and what do you sort of vision down the road for even better uses of that data to help you do what you're trying to do in your field?
The most important part,
I think the most important part of collecting the data is the tracking and databases you're going to be able to keep, and how you categorize and maintain the data so it's searchable and usable later for maybe entirely different reasons than what you collected it in the first place. We've spent a lot of time on databases and those types of tools, so that we're able to recall the data and utilize it and look at it in different ways. A big pile of written lab books sitting in the corner isn't going to do anyone any good because it's not accessible. And in this day and age, there's so many tools out there in the IT field that allow you to do this very smartly. And as you start it up and build your protocol for testing, figuring out how you're going to catalog and store that data and make it available is really, really critical.
So if I can build on that a little bit, we've had, well, sort of an interesting observation coming out of the campus here is that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we have an undergraduate BS in environmental science, and we track, of course, our graduates and what kind of jobs they get and what they do. And one of the observations is that quite often our students end up doing a lot of work analyzing other people's data. You know, certainly some of them work in labs and they go in the field and do that kind of work, but oftentimes when you are hired by consulting firms or agencies, you end up analyzing other people's data. And it strikes us that there's an opportunity to change the way we train our students to emphasize more that aspect of, you know, getting them smart about not only statistics and geographic information systems and things sort of that I know about, but there's this thing out there called big data that I don't know much about, but apparently it's all the rage. And it is, you know, there's sort of this recognition that there's all this data streaming in now, and our students and all of us, it's no longer an issue of the career is not about generating data. The careers now are about filtering out all the noise and figuring out what all that data is telling you. So I think there's opportunities for us at UW-Tacoma to develop new courses and new degree programs that focus on information technology and the environment and the interface between those two. So.
I think Joel and I think it's been covered. I'm not going to go into that any further.
Okay, I did see a hand in the back, a question back there. Please identify yourself first.
Dan Rye, Water Quality Manager for Pierce County Surface Water Management. Mike, I was wondering if you could touch on a little bit about the asset management benefits from enhanced maintenance, and also how easy was a transition from street sweeping as a road operations function to a stormwater management function?
If you've been tracking our general fund, it was pretty easy. I'll start with the street sweeping portion. I mean, it was kind of a natural connection to do that. It made sense for the purposes we keep. Once we made the connection of, you know, it's not just an aesthetic to keep the streets clean, that there's actually a function, and that function ultimately is water quality. And when you make that connection, it's pretty strong, and our data sets actually show that it's pretty strong. So it was a very good move. You know, there were some union issues with that and some discussions with doing that, but overall, those were pretty minor based upon the benefit and the control and the plans we now have to focus on certain watersheds that get, you know, we may do certain watersheds more often than other watersheds just because we know the contaminant levels or what portions that those watersheds drain into. So that's important. And I'm sorry, what was the second or the first part of your question?
Point for the enhanced maintenance.
There's a couple of different factors to that. First is a mapping of our system, which is really a key portion to that. So it's all directly linked. The enhanced maintenance is based upon a lot of the mapping we do, which then we take on the effect, which is part of our asset management program. So once you know where your entire system is and you can track and understand its current status, and then we build our maintenance plans off of that. Our asset management plan, currently we're done. There's numerous other things involved with that, but we're currently using the strap and the wrap cameras. We initially set out on our asset management program to figure out the status of our pipes and catch basins and all those collection systems for our capital improvement program, so we can figure out how much we need to spend annually to stabilize our capital improvement programs. But really what we're showing also in that is that by keeping them clean and being able to do that, those systems are work very much easier. Our strap program, for instance, right now, which is our jet cameras we're prototyping, had them for about 2 years. We thought mapping and visually filming all of our storm pipes that were 10 inches and above was going to take somewhere around 10 or 15 years. We're almost complete in 4. So, and part of the cleaning of the system in front of that makes the use of this new camera system possible. So it can be combined, and there's multiple benefits to keeping your system clean.
Thank you. There's another, I see here, and then we'll go to Ryan over here. Eagles, identify yourself.
Yes, Eagles, Milberg's Economic Development Commission for Washington State. So I wanted to ask the innovation rock stars here of water technology, what are the opportunities for scaling the collaboration? You've obviously built a powerful partnership right here in Tacoma-Pierce County, but we have tremendous assets across the state and the Pacific Northwest that could be tied in. You mentioned big data, cloud computing, medical device, sensors, surveillance, a lot of stuff going on. Eastern Washington when it comes to water management, particularly for agriculture and so on. How do you, what's the scenario for kind of expanding and scaling the collaboration beyond Tacoma?
Eagles, I can address that from the stormwater perspective to some degree, in that the Stormwater Center, the Washington Stormwater Center that Joel Baker and I developed, is now expanding into Eastern Washington. We're developing an Eastern Washington branch, which will probably be located in Spokane. We're addressing the needs that are quite different, actually, under the conditions, the different environmental conditions throughout Eastern Washington versus Western Washington. And we've been in conversations with other states. Joel, I'll let Joel talk about the tape part of that as well, but even in terms of how we manage stormwater up here, other states are looking to us for leadership in this area. Washington is already considered pretty much a leader in this area. And so we've had inquiries into things like this. If you guys approve something or if you do something a certain way, then we want to be on board with that. So we've talked to Oregon, for example. We've even had some conversations with California, Idaho, Montana. So what we're hoping is that within a stormwater context at least, our center, the Washington Stormwater Center, the research collaborations we have, will be the leaders in the Northwest at least, and maybe beyond that, at least in terms of stormwater and green stormwater infrastructure.
And just to follow up on the certification program that we have, there's definitely interest nationwide in a certification program. My best guess is that that's going to look something like a constellation of maybe 2 or 3 or 4 locations around the country that are involved in something similar to our TAPE program. There doesn't seem to be a national leadership on that issue from EPA, and frankly, the stormwater issues are different enough around the country. It probably makes sense to do it regionally. The other point I wanted to respond to your comment, Eagles, is one of the things that's extremely exciting about this field right now is and in this place is I do get the sense that there's this tremendous coming together of information technology, and we're the land of Microsoft, and we know how to do this computer stuff pretty well. A lot of that stuff hasn't been applied to the water technology side to the extent that it could be. I think there's a huge upside on marrying together the information technology, and then also on the biomedical side, as you point out, that a lot of the sensor technologies that are developed aren't developed for water quality. They're developed for human health and monitoring. But it's blood and seawater are almost identical if you're a chemist. So there's lots of opportunities there as well.
Do one more. Did we hit Ryan? Go ahead. Identify yourself.
Ryan Petty with the Economic Development Board. For any in the group, in terms of the problems you're trying to solve, where do you think some of the better entrepreneurial opportunities might be? Where is there an unmet need that you wish the private sector would step forward and show you how to solve?
We've seen we've prototyped several different types of technologies within the Tacoma utilities. The one that's really we're attracted to right now is we talked about testing of the strap and the wrap program for cameras. We're working, actually our crews are actually modifying a German camera that was made in the guy's garage where we bought half a dozen of them. to fit down to 8 and 6-inch pipes, or maybe 4-inch pipes for our laterals. And so we're taking our experience from a camera that was built in Europe, which the pipes tend to be much larger than here, and we're shrinking it down and miniaturizing it and using some of that IT technology we have so that we will be able to utilize that. So things of that knowledge of taking things from other markets, bringing them here and tweaking them to fit into the U.S. type infrastructure are really important. The other piece, I think, is in the construction fields. We've done, recently just did the Cheney Stadium pilot where we did Clay Huntington Way. We reduced runoff from Cheney Stadium by almost 80%. And in doing so, we tested 6 different technologies. The amazing part about all that is compared to a traditional civil engineering type structure or filtration and piping system, we were about half the cost, including asphalt and all in. So these systems of infiltration, where they work and where the geology is correct and where all the factors come together, are really a life cycle cost benefit, and a huge construction savings can be seen, not only for the facility owners, but for the general economy and for the water quality, et cetera. And I think that you're going to see a growth in those technologies as we test them, pilot them, and prove them in the future.
John, anything to add?
I'll just add something about pervious pavements, porous asphalt, and pervious concrete. These are technologies that have a lot of potential, but there are many unanswered questions about their performance, how long they last, the cost versus what you save in terms of construction sites. We're trying to answer a lot of these questions now at our center, and if they come out positively, or come out in a positive way, I think that there's going to be a big explosion of this technology in our area and maybe throughout the country. But again, we've got to get there and answer the scientific questions about it and engineering questions about these technologies. But I think there's tremendous potential there. There aren't many companies that really produce these products right now. And again, I think that that's an exciting area coming up in the near future.
Excellent. Let's thank this panel one more time. Thank you very much.